what's important to us, and then talk about it and get people to understand that we're not where we want to be.
How about public service announcements? How about getting the wherewithal, maybe with corporate help, to create public service announcements on television? The one thing that people seem to pay attention to. I know at dinner, when I'm watching the news, there are about 5 medications that go up there, all of which I immediately assume that I need and I have to call my doctor for, being somewhat hypochondriacal. So is it possible to do that? To say, like the story that you tell, that really grabs people when it hits them on a personal level. More of those, and get the stations to give some time to these public service announcements. My God, during a political campaign, you can't turn on the television without being inundated with politics. But something that can save people's lives, something that can build the state. Is there any direction that we're going in that regard?
Rick's our communications director.
Oh, nice toss this way. So I think it's a good idea. I don't know that we've actually talked about that one, but we can certainly do it. We're basically, come one, come all the possible bully pulpits will go for it. Look, we're even here, Alan, talking about it to your massive audience throughout the state.
Well, this becomes a massive audience, not just in Burnsville-Egan, but when you take the DVDs and you show them in every community in the MACTA system. Suppose we cut 60 DVDs and show them in every community in the MACTA system, the Minnesota public television system. That does get all over the state.
Absolutely, yeah.
I do a show with the Twins, and the Twins see to it that it's all, as our Twins Fest show is just about to do, it'll be every place. Well, here's something where we're not talking about baseball, and we're not talking about politics, and we're not talking about selling drugs, but we're talking about the future.
No, we definitely have talked about that aspect of it, and we plan to do that. We think that's absolutely this is a great thing to run on community TV for people to get an idea about what's going on. And the funny thing, when you say this, maybe we could all comment a little bit on it, but when you say science and technology jobs, people they think biotech, they think programmers, so they start narrowing in on a group of people that to them is a little bit smaller and maybe doesn't involve them. But today, you mentioned solar. There's a lot of technology required to have solar operations in your state. Forestry is involved heavily with all kinds of science these days. Farming is involved in science. Mining has a lot of science involved in how to leave the environment in good shape as you do the mining. Almost all of our core jobs from the last century today have huge technical and science components to them. So you almost can't be successful even in the jobs that you've had if you don't increase the science and technology capability of your residents and of the state. They'll have to go somewhere else to get the employees, and we don't want that.
Iowa with wind power. Driving to Omaha recently, I was overwhelmed by the amount of windmills that are in Iowa. If I could have gotten the car off the ground, we would have been propelled right to Omaha. There's no doubt about it with that wind energy.
The other piece, though, is people might say, well, I'm not a scientist, I'm not an engineer, so this isn't really about me. This isn't going to help me get a job. But I actually did some analysis of the life science industry and what types of jobs there were within the science and within the life science industry. And what I found was that 2/3 of the people that work for life science companies are not scientists or engineers or even technicians. There were more salespeople than there were scientists and engineers. There were lots of administrative assistants. There were people in production and marketing. So science and technology companies support all types of jobs. So above and beyond those spin-out jobs that I mentioned, even within the science and technology sector itself, there's a lot of opportunity for people with all different types of skill sets, and they're all needed, and they're all just as important.
Now, yesterday, the Department of Commerce and, Connect Minnesota was supposed to release their report.
Startup
Is that what you were talking about?
That's what I was talking about.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what
Did
I
they
was-
release that report?
They did.
And
They did, and it was a large update. It basically took the Minnesota Ultra High Speed Broadband Task Force recommendations and report that was issued approximately, it was out at the end of 2009. And it basically said, here's an update to where that was and what's going on based on the laws and the rules that were passed about that. And I was referring to those statistics a little bit earlier. We've made some progress. We still have gaps to go. And as you pointed out, I think correctly, as we go through the next couple of years, wireless will definitely help. But most Minnesotans have, not all, 94% Minnesotans have access to what's considered high speed by those definitions. Many take it, some don't, but there's still a good 6% in our state that don't have that capability. And that's about 118,000 individuals that do not have that kind of access. And one of the very important goals from the task force is ubiquitous coverage, meaning everybody has access, so we can be sure that we could reach everybody that way. So there's many programs. Many of the universities are involved in training programs, secondhand computers to get to people, because having a device that you can access the internet with is one of the impediments. Learning is an impediment, knowing how to use things. So there's a lot of programs going on to help facilitate that.
And there are a lot of people that are intimidated by learning computers and things like that. My mother, who died at 99, wouldn't touch a computer, and yet my mother-in-law, who died at 89, both 3 years ago, became very computer proficient and used it all the time. And
It's a very
fortunately, she
interesting
was
phenomenon.
here that she had access to it.
It's a very interesting phenomenon. I think I'll give you an anecdote to Betsy's story idea. So my father uses the computer, and my father's 80 years old, and he learned how to do it, and it was something pretty new for him over the last few years, and he's gotten proficient with it. My mother always stayed away from it. It was telling my father to write the email, or where are the pictures from the kids and the grandkids and all that. One time I'm with my mother, and I give her my iPad, and I just showed her the bookstore and how an ebook looks and things like that. She wouldn't give it back to me. I couldn't get her to stop using it, and at the end of the day would come, I'd put it away. The next morning we'd be down having coffee, and she'd say, "Where's that iPad?" I have to get it out for her and give it to her. Well, my brother and my sister and I, we got her an iPad for Christmas. And now
And you haven't seen her since.
Haven't seen her since. She's totally proficient at the use of the iPad. Somehow that technology for her was totally different than the other technology, and she's taken off, and now she signs emails cyber-Grammy. So she's off doing all these kinds of things. So I think, access is important in that regard, but that's the access, the story, personalizing it, that's what Betsy was talking about, where there's a way to get people to see that this makes a difference in their future, both for their kids, their grandkids, in the big macroeconomic picture. A vibrant state has good schools, has good cultural activities, has good transportation, but also then you have somebody who gets sick in your family, and you want to have strong R&D in your country to bring these drugs from the clinical trials, from the lab trials, into the public domain, so people can buy these things and get rid of these diseases or conquer them.
And people come from all over the world to go to the Mayo Clinic.
They do.
And, talking about research and development, University of Minnesota, a few years back, more than today, had some of the top researchers in the country. Well, many of them were lured away to other states for more money. That's a black mark against the state. That should not happen. We can't let that happen.
Well, the university system is such a core to having a vibrant R&D community in the state. I mean, there's no doubt about that.
Right. I think something we haven't been mentioning about these jobs, or thinking about other countries, makes me think of it is the fact that one of the reasons that so many states are focusing on these types of jobs is because they're the types of jobs where we can compete against other countries in the world. Innovation, knowledge-based jobs are really going to be where it's at in the future, and many states have seen that, embraced it. And I think Minnesotans probably would agree with that to a large extent. Other states are perhaps being more aggressive in making sure they're going to be the leader in the knowledge-based economy. What's kind of scary is even some of the leading states are now putting huge amounts of money into this. So it's not just like North Carolina that says, you know what, we're way behind, let's put a bunch of money into this. What's a little unnerving is Massachusetts, for example, which is arguably, between it and California, one of them is the leading biopharmaceutical industry leader. And Massachusetts announced a couple years ago that they're going to put $1 billion into their life science industry. So that's a little bit daunting when you think, okay, already they're number one. Now they're going to be investing quite heavily in this. So it's that, you know, kind of the importance of knowledge-based job, I think, is one of the things that motivates the authority, and the recognition that there are states like Massachusetts that are being very aggressive in this domain.
And most of those states have much larger populations than we do. But in the past, that hasn't been a deterrent, because Minnesota was always out front with a lot of these things, notwithstanding a 5 million or a 5.5 million population as against California's, I don't even know what they have now, or Massachusetts, which is larger, or New York, although I don't think New York is on the cutting edge of these things. But that's what we have to get back to. Are there too many entities doing the same thing in this area now? One of the things that I got when I was reading some of the reports and some of the material lately is that I have all these different names, and I was wondering, are there too many entities going in the same direction? Should it be more centralized, like through the authority or the commission?
I think when Gail mentioned earlier the Biobusiness Alliance and Agriculture Utilization Research Institute, they have a specialized niche and they're very, very good at what they do. They focus, you know, RE focuses on ag-related industry, and then Biobusiness Alliance focuses on life science, bioscience, and some energy. And they're very, very, very good at what they do. And I think what the authority does is complements what they do. The authority also is a statewide initiative. And we're looking, you know, to do more of an investment in companies. So they fit a certain part of the continuum of growth, but the state addresses, we came up with 6 large industry sectors. So what is not covered by some of the other organizations is aerospace and defense, some of the advanced manufacturing, some of the IT and computers. So how do we as a state support multiple industries in putting forth this effort to grow high entrepreneurial companies? And I think the authority can only complement and support these other organizations, and with all of them together, we can help grow these high-paying jobs.
I think we've talked a lot about the missions of those groups. We haven't talked to maybe all of the groups, but you know, in my way of thinking, if we could get to a point where the authority was the coordinating point, because we know the ones that we've talked to are not duplicate of each other, and that by talking about it and understanding the missions, we can make sure we are complementary. And I think that would be the
as opposed to competing.
Right. There's no competition in the group. There's some of each of those groups are out with an initiative, and they're talking about the money they need to sustain what they've already got going, or maybe there's a budgetary request or whatever it is. We know about those. We're not asking for duplicate money. We're not competing with each other. When you add them all up, we're able to address the different sectors. And I think that's the role the authority can bring, because then the authority can speak to inbound businesses or entrepreneurs about what's going on across the board. They're an authoritative voice in terms of how to get investments, where the investments are, what the associations are for a vertical, how you deal with them. And that's a great power, because other states do that. They coordinate, they have one clearinghouse area, and they make sure there isn't duplication or competition.
Can we look to the federal government for help in this regard? Are there grants and things like that out there? I mean, there should be, but are there?
There are specific grants for the small high-tech business. There's 11 federal agencies that participate in the small business program, and it's to take proof of concept through prototype development. But they still have that commercialization step that they need to get through. So with state investment, these companies could leverage the federal investment that they get and get them through that commercialization portion of what needs to be done to create the jobs and grow the industry. So, but, and it's interesting, I had some people, years ago, when I moved here 6 years ago, I worked in this small business program, and I would talk to them about it, and they'd just say, oh, you know, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of paperwork, and it is a lot to put a grant together, and I said, but we'll hold your hand, we'll help you do it. I don't know, I think I'll go to a venture capitalist, an angel, and I said, okay. But I would recommend that you do a dual path, because it's the same information, same amount of time.
If the money is out there,
well,
go for it.
It's competitive, but it's non-dilutive. Federal government money is non-dilutive. And so 3 years later, they come back, Betsy, yeah, well, can we talk to you about this program? And I said, well, where's your technology? Because 3 years is a long time ago. And technology is continuously speeding up. The growth is continuously speeding up. And I think a lot of that is due to our internet access. I mean, it's just opened up a whole new world. And when you look at supercomputers and the ability to communicate globally and partner globally, you have to be 10 years ahead of the game. And so thinking 10 years ahead is another thing they're just so focused on, I want to get this done. Yeah. And it is a lot of effort, but we're hoping that with one of the programs we're proposing is an entrepreneurial business accelerator, which would hold their hand from the time they have the idea to the time they're ready for angel investment.
Very important.
Yes,
yeah.
Very important.
And hopefully help them file the papers to get this federal money.
Yes.
And I have noticed in the past few days, I made some notes while I was preparing for this New York Times article on the 17th of this month. Digital age is slow to arrive in rural America, and they use the example of Coffeyville, Alabama. The Pioneer Press editorial of last week talking about the need for this. Several other publications that have come out recently, so that I'm starting to see that awareness, and assuming that people still read, and I'm not sure that's a fair assumption, but they will see it. And if we get those organizations that push it, and if we can get it onto the net, if we can get it through the corporations and the media corporations, instead of having politicians fighting with each other, politicians who are looking down the road. I mean, you alluded to infrastructure. Well, the fact of the matter is that had we been aware of our infrastructure needs, the 35W bridge would not have gone down. We were aware of it. We ignored it. And suddenly 60% of the bridges in this state are unsafe because our priorities have been really turned the wrong way over the last decade. We need to attend to the infrastructure. We need to attend to this need desperately, as I've said twice already, for the future, not for today. It's not going to make any difference to my generation. It's not going to make any difference maybe to the next generation. But to look at children and my grandchildren who are so computer savvy, it's going to make a difference to them, and it's going to make jobs for them, and it's going to make industry for them, and it's going to help the country.
Well, we mentioned this a little bit earlier. Betsy mentioned that you can't do it in the state. This came up both in the Science and Technology Commission and also in the Broadband Task Force. I think our elected representatives need to change the Constitution to allow bonding for these types of projects, because the problem is that these are long-term investments and they're capital intensive, but they are used for, years and years and years. I mean, if you put fiber in, and I'm not saying the state should, but the state could actually help people do it to the rural areas. The fiber life is over 30 years. So when in business, if you have an asset and its useful life is 5 years, you basically amortize the cost of that over 5 years. If it's 10 years, you amortize it over 10 years. If it's a building you've purchased that you're going to work in, and then you amortize it over the life of the building's going to last. So the bigger it is, the longer you can you can actually pay for it. So you pay for it over your own credit time. And I think if the state looked at some of these infrastructure plays this way, we'd be a lot better off. So that was a recommendation in the broadband report, and I think it's a very important one to be considered. And that would allow some of these investments to be done like some of the other states do them, where you say this is a long-term thing, this is the way we dig ourselves out of the hole.
And get this type of information to every legislator, so that the legislators understand what we are talking about and the need of what we are talking about.
I think we have pretty good, and we have a lot of very engaged
Yes.
legislators. Betsy and I met earlier in the week with the lieutenant governor. We're going through all kinds of people in the administration. 5 of the governor's commissioners make up the authority, and Betsy's talked to them all about this. We're working very hard on that aspect of it, and I think we have a lot of support. We just got to keep working on it.
It's not a partisan issue, it's a conscience issue.
Well, Alan, I like that you say that because I've spent the last week or so, and this is just the beginning of spending a lot of time up at the Capitol talking to legislators, and it is bipartisan support. Because, again, when you can find that technology that has personal meaning for them, they definitely want to see that technology grow, not only to be of a benefit for someone that they know or love or friend, but how can we then grow those jobs here in Minnesota and make that happen? So we've had excellent response in sitting down and talking with legislators and just giving them, they're so busy right now. They are so busy, and we get about 15 minutes with each one of them. And in that 15 minutes, we've actually had a couple that have wanted to sign on to the bill. Because once I sit down and talk to them and take the scariness of the science and technology away, they say, wow, we really need to do this.
Because unfortunately, some of the things that they're so busy with are really of no importance except to certain groups that they want to please and or lobbyists that they want to please, as opposed to looking to the benefit of everybody down the road in the future.
Well, I gotta say this. Legislators are an amazing group of people. They all have their certain skill set, but when they get elected, all of a sudden they have multiple issues, initiatives that are brought to them that they don't have any background or experience in, and they have to rely on what snapshot of information is given to them to make a decision. So, first and foremost, they're responsible for their region, and they're responsible for the state, and there's 24 hours in a day, and these legislators, some of them are working 6:30 in the morning till 10 o'clock at night, and this is just the beginning.
Until May.
Yeah, and then then it becomes 2 or 3 in the morning that they work till. So there is so much that they are
let's
bombarded
get them
with.
between May and next January.
Betsy, how are things different this year in terms of the tone and the response you're getting versus when you've talked to legislators in the past? Do you see any difference this year?
This is the first year I've ever been able to really talk to legislators.
Okay.
But again, as I said, when I walk in, and I don't have a technical background, but I love this stuff. I just am fascinated by it. So when we're in a club. Neither one, most of the one that I would talk, we have this club, we're not backgrounds in science and technology, but when I can break it down in layman's terms so that they can understand, then they get excited.
Mm-hmm. Betsy,
First for the
I can
technology.
understand it. Anybody can understand it.
I
Trust
say that
me.
too. I say that too.
And I understand also that we've actually run through an hour already. And all of this that we didn't get a chance to talk about. You willing to come back again?
Sure.
Happy to.
Gail O'Kane, Betsy loves. Rick King, our father and emperor, and
I have to ride in the car with him later,
in
you
the
know?
in the current climate in the world, I don't think I want to be father or emperor. Okay.
it's, I bet you could do a job in Libya right now. And
Well, the path is clear as far as I'm concerned. I know what I would do if I was in Libya. But
I feel a lot better that with minds like yours and dedication like yours, that every dog will be able to watch the Puppy Bowl next year like my dog did. And thank you so much.
Thank you, Alan.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alan.